Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these screens behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our affiliates and stations across the country. If there's some news happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. Any minute now, President-elect Donald Trump will address Republican lawmakers as they hold secret ballots to elect new congressional leaders. We'll bring you that live once it begins. And this comes just before he goes to the White House for a ceremonial meeting that he skipped back in 2020. What we can expect when he does sit down with President Biden in the Oval Office today. And all of this as the president-elect continues the rapid-fire naming of potential nominees for his incoming administration. What you need to know about the latest loyalist and a cable news host that's joining the team. This is CBS News 24/7. As we speak, folks, House and Senate Republicans are gathering for a series of votes that will have a major impact on the party's future. And they have a special guest today. President-elect Donald Trump has just arrived in Washington, D.C. This is tape playback from moments ago. He's on his way to the conference meeting. Top leadership posts are being decided as Republicans prepare to take the majority in the Senate next year. CBS News has classified the House as a lean Republican. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is joining us live from the Russell Rotunda this morning to talk about all this. It's good to see you, Nicole. So let's, for our viewers who are trying to understand what is happening today on the Hill, explain what these votes in the House, what they are for.
Well, this is pretty customary in both chambers to have these types of leadership elections, particularly after an election, whether that is a midterm election or a presidential election, just to establish who will be leading the respective parties in their respective chambers when the new session of Congress convenes in January. So today what is happening on the Hill is that we have House leadership elections and we have Senate leadership elections. Over in the House, there's not too much drama. We remember there was a lot of drama a little over a year ago with that battle for House Speaker. But this time around with Republicans, pretty confident that they'll retain the majority in the House. Speaker Johnson has made clear he would like to hold on to his role, and at this point, there doesn't appear to be any significant challenges to that, although just to be clear, we would not see any kind of vote on the House floor until that next session of Congress convenes in January. So this is kind of more, housekeeping, if you will, or general order of business. Perhaps the race that we're watching most closely, though, in the House is for House GOP Conference Chair, as we've been reporting. Elise Stefanik, who currently holds that role, has been tapped to serve in the next Trump administration as the U.S. ambassador to the UN if she is nominated and confirmed. And so for that reason, there has been some jockeying for her position between Lisa McClain of Michigan and Kat Cammack of Florida, who are both pretty well-liked and well-known within the House Republican Conference.
Nicole, as we mentioned, the president-elect is meeting with some House Republicans ahead of that vote. And you've got some reporting about who is also going to be in attendance.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we learned a short time ago from a source familiar that Elon Musk is expected to join that House Republican conference meeting, which is notable. We know that he is a very close ally of the president-elect, was just named to this new division that will oversee government efficiency along with Vivek Ramaswamy. He has been a constant, or was a constant, on the campaign trail for the president-elect, particularly in Pennsylvania, and was often mentioned by the president-elect time and again in terms of kind of his resources and what he brings to the table. So we have learned that he will be joining this meeting with House Republicans. And speaking with Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday, Speaker Johnson told me that this meeting today is really about getting an opportunity to have that FaceTime with the president-elect, being able to congratulate him on what they believe was a race well won. The president-elect was very busy on the campaign trail, as were many of these Republican candidates for Congress. So therefore, they just want some time to powwow and more than likely to strategize about the path ahead as they prepare for this new Trump administration and potentially a Republican trifecta here in Washington.
All right, Nicole Killian for us this morning, reporting from Capitol Hill. As always, Nicole, we appreciate you. Thanks. All right. After the meeting with the GOP, the president-elect will then head to the White House for that meeting with President Biden. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is live at the White House for us this morning. And so, Nancy, let's talk about this. Look, I don't want to be a cynical journalist about all this, but it's sort of interesting that 4 years ago, the former president, now the president-elect, did not invite President Biden to the office for that traditional meeting that's been going on since probably before you and I were even born. So it's sort of notable that now with a Democrat in the Oval Office, the Democrat extends that branch to the incoming president of the United States. And by the way, he accepted.
Right. And, you know, this is about more, Vlad, than optics and niceties. There really is a very complicated transition process that is supposed to happen every 4 years or 8 years when there's a change of administration. It involves every agency in this government, and there's a very specific procedure that is normally followed. So the fact that President Trump 4 years ago didn't invite Biden to the White House, that was just one of the many ways in which the typical transition process did not take place, and it really put the Biden team on the back foot when he did actually take office. And we now see that the president-elect has arrived on stage with House Republicans. So let's listen into that.
It's always nice to win. A lot of good friends in this room. So you know we had like historic kind of numbers, especially for the president, but we won't get into that. But the House did very well, and I think we're responsible for 31, helping you with 31. Meaning we could have lost by quite a bit, and we ended up, I guess you'll be 5 up. Are you looking at 5 or 4? 5 or 4, right? Doesn't matter. We get used to 1 for a little while. When you can get used to 1, you can get used to anything. So I just want to thank everybody. You've been incredible. We worked with a lot of you to get you in, and you helped me, and you helped me too. And my numbers were, so they say, the 129 years is the most important election in 129 years. That's pretty good. I said, who is the 129 years? What was that, Doc Ronnie? Who was 129 years ago? I'd never looked because it started at being 100, and then they upped it to that. But it's a great compliment. We won the majority by 7.1 million. We won, which is great because Republicans aren't supposed to be winning the majority, Marjorie. You know that, right? And we won that, and we won it every way, all 7 swing states by a lot. And then Michigan was great, couldn't be better, I'll tell you. Michigan was great, and we had a couple of people, almost New Jersey is right, just a few points. It's got them very worried because they say, well, next time if we go up even a fraction of what we went up, you're going to win New York, you're going to win New Jersey, you're going to win places that weren't winnable. California, too. I think without one speech, without campaigning at all in California, we were lost by 9 points. I mean, 9 points in California.
All right. You are listening there and watching the president-elect of the United States. He's addressing the Republican conference. The cameraman seems to have I love when that happens, the technical side of television. But the good news, folks, is we've been talking to Nancy Cordes about the significance of the meeting that the president will have later on after this speech to that Republican conference, Nancy. And Nancy's still with us, joining us from the White House. So Nancy, let's talk about what could potentially be on the agenda. Is there anything on the agenda? And more importantly, will cameras be rolling?
So cameras will be rolling much in the way that you just saw at that speech, Vlad. Will be allowed in at the very start of the meeting in the Oval Office. Maybe we'll hear a few remarks from President Biden, President-elect Trump, and then just like you saw there at that speech before the House Republicans, will get kicked out, and they will, be able to have a more a more candid conversation without reporters hanging on every word. And we do know a few topics that are on President Biden's agenda, at least. Number one, he wants to stress the importance of a good transition where representatives from the Trump team and the Biden team are able to work hand in hand. So that's a smooth handoff. We also know that he really wants to focus on the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and that President Biden is very keen to lay out his view of how those two conflicts should be handled going forward. Now, there's no expectation here at the Biden White House that he is somehow going to change President Trump's views in that one meeting, but there are some points he wants to get across, particularly when it comes to continuing to provide humanitarian aid and military aid to Ukraine, even after he leaves office. His views on, for example, pushing for a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians that he will try to get across in that meeting. Whether he'll make any headway or not, we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll be watching. Nancy Cordes, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
All right, let's bring in CBS News political reporter Libby Cathy to talk more about the Trump transition. So, Libby, walk our audience through exactly what Elon Musk, a billionaire who spent hundreds of millions of dollars in his attempt to help the president-elect win re-election to the White House, what he and Vivek Ramaswamy would be tasked with in the Trump administration. And I feel like there's sort of a little bit of trolling going on there that the name of this pseudo government organization has the initials that spell out Doge, which is a cryptocurrency that Elon Musk touts all the time, which is probably going to make him more money.
Yeah, good to be with you, Vlad. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, having President Trump's ear this week at Mar-a-Lago, and for some time before that, as you mentioned, donating millions to his campaign. Well, that seems to be paying off in an appointment, per se, this pseudo-government department, as you call it, the Department of Government Efficiency. Trump announced yesterday that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy would lead this department. Now, there's a lot of questions about what exactly it would do, but the initials, the acronym DOGE, Doge, that is a little bit of a trolling, as you mentioned, referring to that meme of the winking dog. Musk's posts very often on the platform Twitter. He just bought X now. But Doge, this Department of Government Efficiency, lots of questions on what exactly it will do, how exactly it will work, but it's meant to cut spending. Vivek Ramaswamy on the campaign trail, when he was challenging now President-elect Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, talked about cutting some 200,000 jobs from the federal workplace, or 10% of the federal workforce. So that's what we're expecting. Elon Musk posted over Twitter this morning saying that the department will be transparent, that they will post how our taxpayers' dollars are being spent. But really, this is showing how much influence Musk has over Trump, with Trump. He's traveling with him today in Washington, joining him at that meeting with Republican lawmakers right now. And this comes as Musk has tons of contracts with the government, with Starlink, with Tesla. So we will see how their relationship plays out in the coming weeks, but so far has had a very close ear to the former president, now the president-elect, Vlad.
So the other thing, Libby, let's talk about Pete Hegseth, who's been selected as the Secretary of Defense, at least to be nominated for the Secretary of Defense. I don't think anybody will question his patriotism and his service to our country. He's a major in the National Guard. But the question that a lot of people have are with regards to the qualifications. Being a company commander or even a battalion commander, if that is what he does at the Guard, in the Guard, is very different than running the world's largest military. And he does also bring to the table a lot of political views, whereas the military is generally thought of as apolitical.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Vlad. A lot are questioning this decision for Pete Hegseth to lead the world's largest military, to be the next Secretary of Defense. But Trump putting out that announcement last night. Now, if you watch Fox News, you'd probably recognize Pete Hegseth. He is a weekend host on Fox and Friends, appears on a lot of weekday programs as well. And I think what this pick reflects is Trump's importance, the significance he's putting on his cabinet members to be able to carry his message on the television screen. Our Weijia Jiang reporting that Trump at Mar-a-Lago has television screens set up and is watching clips of some of these pics to see how they would carry his message. So Pete Hegseth, yes, as you mentioned, a major in the Minnesota National Guard. He has served, but also has spent a lot of time on television carrying Trump's America First message. So that is probably one of the reasons that it's driving this decision. In addition to his service, while he hasn't had government experience, he has had a lot of experience carrying Trump's message to an audience, Vlad.
Libby, help me understand something, because you've covered the Trump campaign and the president himself for some time now. On one hand, the president-elect seems to revere military leaders, and he's talked about this gentleman. He talked about potentially appointing him Secretary of Defense during interviews months ago. So it's not sort of out of left field. But on the other, he also denigrates those military leaders who disagree with them, like General Mark Milley or Admiral William McRaven, or even General John Kelly, who actually served in the Trump administration. Help me understand that dichotomy.
Yeah, so Trump tries to separate what he calls the everyday American military serviceman and these generals at the top that he thinks have become more part of the Biden administration, have become, quote, woke generals, he calls them. But that's how Trump separates it. He says he supports the military, that he is the biggest fan of the military, quote, but then he criticizes these four-star generals that have served this nation and reached the highest rankings possible. You mentioned General Admiral McRaven. We also, John Bolton. The list goes on and on. Milley, John Kelly, people that served with him. Mark Esper. The list goes on and on. People that have served with him that he just denigrates now. And that is because Trump separates these, quote, woke military officials at the Pentagon and what he sees are everyday service members. That is how Trump separates it. But he would say he's a huge supporter of the military. Now, his critics and Democrats would say that, as you pointed out, Trump has absolutely said disparaging things about some of the nation's top generals that have served with him, Vlad.
All right, Libby Cathy, I know, Libby, you're sticking around. We'll talk with you a little bit later in the hour. We appreciate you as always. Thanks. All right, some news, an update on those flights from Haiti that we told you about earlier this week. They've all been temporarily banned after gangs shot at a third plane flying over the country's capital. Details on the ban amid the ongoing violence and political unrest. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We want to take you live right now to the White House, where President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are welcoming Teachers for Classroom to Career Summit. Of course, this after the president, President Trump, will come to the White House, the president-elect. Let's watch.
One of the most important efforts of our presidency, and I mean it. Look, that's why we're all here today. And I want to thank Congressman Norcross in New Jersey. I keep reminding my Jersey guys, we do really well in Jersey. Jill's a Jersey girl, born and raised. And I tell them, though, there was actually a case a long time ago. Delaware is the second smallest state in the nation, but we own the Delaware River up to the high water mark in New Jersey. A Supreme Court decision, for real. So I just want you to know, that's why we're so close. Just step off. Anyway. You're a good man, pal. You really are. And the members of my cabinet are here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And leaders of business, education, unions, philanthropy, nonprofits, and more, for being here and for your leadership. And I mean it sincerely. When we came to office, the pandemic was raging, the economy was reeling. And from day one, I was determined not only to vaccinate the nation, deliver immediate economic relief for the folks who need it the most, but I also determined to transform the way our economy works for everyone. To write a new economic playbook, and I mean it sincerely, a new economic playbook, build the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not from the top down. My dad used to have an expression. He said, Joey, when you talk about trickle-down economics, not a whole hell of a lot trickles down on our kitchen table. Well, when we do that, the poor have a ladder up, and the middle class do well, and the wealthy still be able to do very well. And we all do well. It's a playbook based on a value set that my dad taught.
Of course, we're going to head back to the White House as soon as the president-elect arrives to meet the current president of the United States in the Oval Office. Of course, that is a big meeting happening, and we'll take that live right here on CBS News 24/7. But let's get to some economic news this morning. As economists predicted, inflation ticked up slightly year over year in October. The Consumer Price Index rose 0.2% last month. It is one of the key inflation gauges monitored by the Federal Reserve. The price of housing and food also both increase. So CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is joining me here in Studio 55 to talk about what the numbers mean and potentially, Kelly, an interest rate cut. What do you think?
So this is where it gets a little hairy, right? I want to just kind of level set expectations. We were expecting 2.6%. It is higher. It's not cause for panic. It's cause for concern. Right. We don't like to see this move up, but this is not like we've seen it happen month over month over month. This is the first time that it's actually moved up in a while. Right now, the market is pricing in an 82% chance of a quarter point cut come the next Fed meeting in December.
Odds.
Right, so it's not 100%, but we're leaning that way. What I want to emphasize, though, is this kind of is the first piece of data that the Fed is going to get. We're going to get another CPI report before that meeting, which could impact things, another PPI report. Just to kind of give you a little bit of flavor, the reason why this is up is shelter. Okay, so shelter costs have been rising. They're really sticky. Energy costs came down. That's good. But something I know you and I talk about all the time is why don't people feel the fact that inflation is coming down? The good news in this report is that real wages, so that's inflation adjusted, actually increased 1.4%. So what that means is it might not feel it right now for you at home, but your wages are actually growing faster than inflation. That's something we like to see.
Yeah, because part of the argument that Democrats made during this last election is that the economic data was good and that people just had to hold tight so that wages could catch up to inflation and even surpass it. It is only starting to happen now. And it's hard for people to understand. You can show them all sorts of data and you can put up fancy graphics on the screen. But when they come home and they say, look, the price of milk cost way more than it did 4 years ago. The price of eggs, the price of gasoline, the price to heat my home cost way more than it did 4 years ago. It's a hard argument to go against when you're just showing economic data numbers.
Absolutely. And that's why I always like to say, like, look, I get it. I'm not feeling it at home either.
Right.
And so the data is there, but it's going to take a while for that to flow through. And that's why you saw voters say, like, look, I'm just not feeling it. One
of the things that people always ask me as well, Kelly, is, well, how come interest rates for the cost of homes has not come down, the 30-year fixed? And it's hard for people to understand. They say, well, all the economic data points to good things. The Fed is cutting, and yet it feels like interest rates are even higher than they were 6 months ago.
Okay, so this is all because of inflation. So mortgage rates actually did come down before the Fed cut rates because mortgage rates are tied to the 10-year Treasury. And what that measures is where investors think inflation and the economy is going. So before the Fed cut rates, there was all this messaging that the Fed's going to cut rates. So you started to see mortgage rates come down starting in July for a couple of months. Then that rate cut that we got, the last two, was already priced in. And so now some of the economic data, including today's, has shown that inflation is going to be a little bit of a bumpy road. It's actually going up. And that's why you're seeing mortgage rates go up now. I think it's the past 6 or 7 weeks we've seen them tick up. Yeah. So until we see that inflation data coming down, again, more over time, and that the Fed continues to cut rates, and we think they're going to continue to cut rates, mortgage rates are going to stay where they are.
Okay, what numbers could we potentially see tomorrow? Thursday is always a big day on the economic calendar.
So we're going to get the producer price index, and that's really important because those are the prices producers are making. And guess who they pass that on to, Vlad?
Consumers.
Us. Yeah. So it's an early indication of what you could see down the line in the next inflation report. Economists are mixed, but they're thinking we could see a little bit of an uptick, which again is not what the Fed wants to see. But like I said, we're not panicking yet. We're concerned.
I'm going to want to talk to you over the next couple of weeks, especially as we get to the inauguration and to the next Trump administration, about some of the economic policies that the president-elect has talked about implementing, which some economists say might not be good for the U.S. economy, even though people voted for him because they thought that he could, quote unquote, fix the economy. So it'll be a really interesting discussion to have over the next couple of weeks. Love having you here in the studio, Kelly. As always, market likes what you're saying. Look, it's already up 48 big points. Means nothing, folks. All right. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you as always. All right. Let's turn now to the ongoing unrest in Haiti. Gang violence has prompted the FAA to ban U.S. airlines from flying in and out of the country for the next 30 days. CBS News learned a third airliner was hit with gunfire on Monday at the Port-au-Prince airport. American Airlines says a bullet hole was found on the aircraft after the flight to Miami landed safely. The FBI is investigating after Spirit and JetBlue planes were also hit by gunfire on Monday. Okay, soon, President-elect Donald Trump meets with President Biden at the White House. Trump is with House Republicans right now. We're following it all. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at the top stories that we are following for you this morning. At least 2 people have been killed after a massive explosion at a food coloring factory in Louisville. More than a dozen people were hurt. First responders rescued 1 person who was trapped inside the plant. The explosion blew out windows at nearby homes and businesses, and right now, officials are actually giving an update as they look for a cause of the blast. Let's listen in.
ATF's deploying a national response team. Part of their response is to help Louisville Metro Fire determine the actual cause. But we have had an opportunity to speak with some of the plant employees that were there, witnesses in the neighborhood, and also there's, it's been broadcast, there's some surveillance video of the actual explosion. And so we don't have any reason to believe at this moment that there's any type of nefarious activity. But again, we want to make sure that we have a thorough investigation, and we'll find out what the actual cause was.
So secondary to that 2003 event, that dealt with a solid anhydrous ammonia that is no longer on site. That was not dealt with here. The only thing we can speak to that is that our inspections of that plant over the past several years showed no other issues. As far as the location, I'd have to go back and double check and see the exact locations.
Some of the people yesterday here to see reporters and also people who live in the area described a smell and a taste almost when they were there. What was that exactly, and could that be dangerous to the people who experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, some of that was just the byproducts of combustion, you know, the fire, and most, if not all, that in the neighborhood went away once that fire was extinguished a very short time after the fire department arrived on site. We did have a fire that was determined a little bit later that ended up just being some grass, where some electrical wires caught some grass on fire that hadn't been de-energized yet, and that was going through the air as well. But, you know, like I said, they had air monitors out. And when we talk about air monitoring, it's not, you know, we've got a very sophisticated system in Jefferson County when it comes to air monitoring. You don't have to necessarily hold an air monitor and a human being walk that through the neighborhood. We can put what's called an area array that the Louisville Metro Health Department as well as the Louisville Fire Department has, where we can put those out strategically in the neighborhood, and we can monitor that back at the command post. So we're monitoring it real time. We don't have to continuously send teams out at various times, and nothing's missed in between those times. So, you know, like I said, between the several agencies throughout Jefferson County, we've got a very sophisticated air monitoring system.
So the people who experience
All right, we've been bringing you a live update from officials in Louisville discussing that deadly explosion that happened. And right now, they still don't have any answers to actually what caused it, at least as far as they know. But the investigation continues. We're going to continue to follow that story all throughout the day. And if we have some answers, they have answers, we'll bring you those answers. So stick around for that. Meanwhile, another top story. President-elect Donald Trump is planning to meet with President Biden at the White House this morning. Trump has been speaking to GOP leaders ahead of that meeting at the leadership elections to replace Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. CBS News political reporter Libby Cathy is joining me again to talk more about this. So, Libby, we already had a conversation with Nancy Cordes at the White House, but what are you learning from the Trump people about what his expectations are potentially with this visit?
Yeah, this is a significant day for Trump and his campaign and his transition team at this point, and they know that. As Nancy laid out, this is his first time seeing Biden since the debate back in June in Atlanta. Obviously, there was no love lost between the two then, with Biden calling Trump, saying he has the morals of an alley cat, and Trump calling Biden a Manchurian candidate and saying he's owned by China. So that was the last time the two were face to face, and they had fierce words for each other. Today, this meeting is symbolic for the peaceful transfer of power, hallmark to our nation's democracy. And the Trump transition team happy to accept this meeting, although it was not an invitation. We know that Trump offered Biden when Biden was elected in 2020. So hugely significant meeting. And joining him in Washington today, is Elon Musk, the world's richest man who has had Trump's ear at Mar-a-Lago the last week as he's been firing off those cabinet picks, Vlad.
Let me ask you about the conversations that the president-elect is having with leaders within the GOP. What are you hearing about any details of what his expectations are in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so significant that Trump is speaking to Republican lawmakers today as well as they elect their next leadership for the new Congress. Now, we got to see some of those remarks at the top. He talked about his win, and there is a quote that he said that's raising some eyebrows. I want to read it off to you, Vlad. He said, "I suspect I won't be running again for the presidency unless you do something else, unless you say he's so good, we've got to figure something out." Now, that's raising eyebrows. Trump seemingly musing on the stage there. And this comes as obviously Vice President Kamala Harris and other Democrats really painted him as a fascist and an authoritarian leader in the last days of the campaign. So that quote, probably not doing much to quell those rumors and those concerns, but Trump will likely be asked about it. We will ask his campaign exactly what he meant by that when he just said that to Republican lawmakers. And this all comes ahead as we've talked to him. We'll head to the White House next to meet with Biden, and we will see if he talks to us reporters after that meeting as well, Vlad.
Libby, let me ask you a question about some of the other leaders within the Republican Party, specifically the Senate, and the kinds of conversations the president is having there. First, with this pick of the president-elect to nominate Marco Rubio to be the Secretary of State. Apparently, according to some reports that I've seen, Governor Ron DeSantis was not made aware of the president's decision until we all found out, meaning when it was first submitted to us via statement from the president-elect's office. So I want to hear from you what you're hearing about that, if you know anything more, and who the president is potentially backing to replace Mitch McConnell. We've seen Florida Senator Rick Scott in front of the cameras talking as if it's a foregone conclusion that he might be that Republican Senate Majority Leader. But what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, to answer your second question there, Rick Scott, John Cornyn, John Thune, these are some of the names running to replace Senate Majority Leader, or Minority Leader, soon to be Majority Leader, since Republicans are taking back the Senate. Now, Trump has not weighed in on who his favorite is, but many are thinking that could be Rick Scott, the Florida senator, just because he has carried Trump's America First and MAGA agenda so far. In online circles, Elon Musk, for instance, who we just talked about having President-elect Trump's ear, he has endorsed Rick Scott for Majority Leader. Now, on the Marco Rubio element of it all, I think what's notable here, Vlad, is that while it's been reported through several sources that Trump is poised to tap Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, the nation's top diplomat, we have not heard this from Trump himself. There has not been a statement from Trump. So we will see if Rubio is tapped there. And as you said, maybe something going on behind the scenes, since we have not gotten that confirmation and we have had other picks, Vlad.
Yeah, that's an interesting detail, Libby, only because, and you'll know better than I, because you've been tracking the Trump campaign throughout this election cycle, that MAGA world, meaning not the president and not administration officials, sort of see Marco Rubio as even though he's sort of a faithful sycophant of Donald Trump's, but they see him as sort of an establishment type, a war hawk type, which is seemingly against like what some of the young MAGA people and the bros within that movement seem to prefer. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. Marco Rubio is hawkish. He has also talked about support for Ukraine. And as we know, Trump campaigned on getting out of Ukraine. So as we said, it has not been announced. We're wondering if behind the scenes, maybe there are some reservations with that. Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, the former president's son, president-elect's sons have had a big say in some of these selections. So it's not over until it's over. And Trump has not announced Marco Rubio because there could be those concerns that he's not quite on the America First agenda that Trump is on. I'll also add that, you know what, I'm being told to wrap, but we will get back to it, Vlad.
Let me finish your thought, please.
I just, as these cabinet picks come out, I think it's important that Trump is looking for someone that can speak to his agenda, that is good on television. Marco Rubio is an experienced speaker, but some of those clips that Trump is watching might be clips of Marco Rubio calling Trump having small hands. Back in 2016, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump were competitors. Trump called Marco Little Marco. Marco Rubio insulted the size of Trump's hands. So some of those clips might be played at Mar-a-Lago this week, and maybe Trump is having second thoughts about that appointment. It is not over till it's over, and we will see who he appoints as the nation's top diplomat. Vlad.
Such an interesting detail that I hadn't considered, Libby. Thank you very much for sharing it. Appreciate it. All right. A former U.S. government employee has been charged with leaking classified information, assessing Israel's earlier plans to attack Iran. Court papers filed today identified the man as Asif William Rahman. The FBI arrested him in Cambodia this week, and he will appear in court in Guam. A late-season hurricane may be brewing in the Caribbean. It could gain strength by this weekend and hit the Gulf of Mexico next week. If the storm develops, it would be named Sarah. 5 hurricanes have made landfall in the U.S. this season. A bleak picture is only worse as the Jennings Creek wildfire continues to scorch areas of New York and New Jersey. That's according to the Garden State officials' climatologist, who warns water supplies are being stressed amid historic dryness. Officials meet today to discuss the possibility of a drought warning. The state's received 2 inches of rain since August, when it should have seen at least a foot. The fire is only 20% contained. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Vlad, it's crazy how dry it is all across the Northeast. And we do have those red flag warnings in effect, really for New England today. It does include portions of New York, but also up into Massachusetts, Boston underneath these red flag warnings today. Windy conditions there, 15 to 20 miles per hour, maybe occasionally gusting to 25 miles per hour. Not quite as windy as yesterday, but it's not just New England, New York. The dry conditions extend all the way down into the mid-Atlantic states, including Baltimore, Philadelphia today, where there is this elevated risk for fires, not so much because of the windy conditions, but because of the dry air and the ongoing drought that just continues to get worse, because we've had a couple of raindrops here or there, but it really hasn't amounted to much, and it looks like that's going to continue. So the drought continues, and those fire concerns will likely continue for at least the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, dryness is not the issue in the Pacific Northwest. The second of 2 atmospheric rivers and associated storm systems are now clashing into the coastal area. Some wind gusts there are around 33 miles per hour. This storm system will continue to pump in that atmospheric river that will bring the heavy coastal rain, lower elevation rain, and then along with the higher elevation snow. Even behind the system, the precipitation will continue as we head through the second half of the week. We are tracking the threat for some heavy rain across the southern Mississippi Valley. Meanwhile, that dry weather persists in the Northeast. I do briefly want to mention, like Vlad was talking about, this area of low pressure in the western Caribbean. It has about a 90% chance of developing over the next couple of days. It will stay in the western Caribbean for the next few days, but the forecast models are becoming more in agreement as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. It could strengthen to near hurricane strength and could have its sights set on Florida. Still some time to figure this out, but Vlad, even though we're nearing the end of hurricane season at the end of the month, here we are yet again tracking another potential hurricane that could impact Florida. Back to you.
Oh, boy. All right, Grant, thank you very much. The special prosecutor who led 2 federal investigations against President-elect Donald Trump is reportedly planning to step down before Trump takes office. So what does this mean for the cases against the president-elect? We're going to discuss. That's coming up ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Special counsel Jack Smith, who led 2 federal prosecutions of President-elect Donald Trump, the guy that you're seeing here alongside the president-elect, will reportedly resign before Trump takes office in January. Smith led indictments against Trump in the federal election interference case and the classified documents case. CBS News contributor Jessica Levinson has been following the developments very closely, and she joins me now to talk about them. So, Jessica, so what does this mean for those cases against the president-elect? If there's no special prosecutor, do they go anywhere?
They do not. They're winding down. And that's what special counsel Jack Smith, I think, is signaling with this decision, which is he's going to control the timing. He's going to control how these cases wind down. He's not going to wait to be fired. And the big question, Vlad, as you know, is a report. So special counsel has to submit a report to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. The question is, when is that report submitted? And do we see the report? We've already seen a lot from this case. We've seen two different versions of the complaint, one before the Supreme Court's decision in that big immunity case, one after the court's decision. But I think this is all signaling Jack Smith saying, I'm going to control the pacing. I can't control much else, but I'm going to control how these cases wind down.
So legally, Jessica, could he write a book after all this is said and done?
Great question. So as long as there aren't national security issues, then I think that, yes, he could absolutely write a book. Again, some of what's in the book might have to be vetted, just like some of what is in the report might have to be vetted. And when it comes to these books, we know we've seen a lot of them from prior administrations. Again, I think the only question really would be, is he disclosing any information that might put the country at risk or would otherwise be subject to any sort of legal evidentiary privileges?
And let's talk about the role of the Attorney General in all of this, Jessica, just so the audience understands how the special counsel came to be appointed in the first place, and specifically as it relates to the timing, because a lot of people expected that Merrick Garland would have done some of this much earlier in his term, which would have given Jack Smith at least the time to wrap it up before the next election, and that never turned out to be the case.
Well, that's right. I mean, we can talk about why it might be the case that special counsel Jack Smith was not appointed earlier, why the work was not completed earlier, but at this point, what you and I know, Vlad, is that special counsel Jack Smith did decide to file these two federal criminal cases. They've both been bogged down in the courts. Vlad, you know that the case involving the D.C. election interference allegations, that was bogged down because we had to wait for the Supreme Court to tell us whether or not presidents or former presidents enjoy immunity from criminal prosecution. That other case, the Florida case, similarly bogged down. And in fact, it was dismissed by the trial court judge, Judge Eileen Cannon. So if all of this had happened earlier, could we have potentially seen a trial or at least more public airing of the allegations and the issues? Absolutely. But that's obviously not what happened here.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Jessica Levinson, hopefully the American people will be made aware of some of the findings that the special counsel uncovered, whether it's through that report or through some other mean. Thank you very much, Jessica. I appreciate it. We're standing by for that Oval Office meeting between President Biden and President-elect Trump. Once it begins, we're going to bring it to you live. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Showing you a live picture right now, folks, of the White House, where very soon we expect President-elect Donald Trump will roll up to the Oval Office to meet with President Biden in that historic meeting, that traditional meeting that happens between the outgoing presidential administration and the incoming presidential administration, meant to signal to the world the peaceful transfer of power, a symbol of the democracy that has existed in this country for 250 years, although last time around, back in 2020, then President Donald Trump did not extend the invitation to President-elect Biden. Very different times right now in 2024. We're going to keep an eye out for the president's motorcade, the president-elect's motorcade, rather. And when that meeting happens, we'll bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, the FBI is reportedly investigating burglaries at the homes of Kansas City Chiefs stars Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. The string of burglaries happened early last month while neither of them were home. At least $20,000 in cash was taken from Kelce's home. Neither one has addressed the burglaries publicly. And if you haven't heard, People unveiled its Sexiest Man Alive magazine issue. Give it up. No. It's not me. It's John Krasinki. The 45-year-old office actor said he thought he was being punked when they told him. Krasinki said his wife, Emily Blunt, was very excited to hear the news, but that he suspects that she will probably make him do more chores at home. If there was a nerdiest guy alive, give it to me. Give it up to me. Give it up to me. Now, congratulations to John Krasinki. That does it for me, folks. But stay right where you are. If you're looking for somebody as good looking as John Krasinki, I ain't it. But I'll be back tomorrow. We're standing by for that Oval Office meeting between President Biden and President-elect Trump, which we will bring to you live once it begins. But after the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.